Beneath the glimmering crowns and the grandeur of coronations, hidden behind the opulent palace walls and the meticulously crafted portraits, were royal figures whose true lives diverged sharply from the legends. These men, while at times commanding armies and signing crucial treaties, also shared quiet affections in ways that the annals of history have chosen to overlook. Some ascended to the heights of empires, while others ruled nothing more than the whispers of speculation. A tapestry of secrets, smudged glances, and untold stories lay woven into the fabric of their royal attire, bearing the weight of their concealed truths. This narrative transcends the history taught in classrooms. Herein lies the tale of 25 royals who were, in truth, born female, a designation the crown would vehemently reject, for these were tales it could never fully silence. But before we embark on this journey, be sure to subscribe. This channel delves into the depths of stories that history has sought to obscure. And as you join us, we invite you to share your whereabouts. Where in the world do you find yourself? Is it midnight in Paris? Perhaps 3 a.m. in Jakarta? We are curious to know who is exploring the shadows of history alongside us. In the Chronicles of King James I of England, history expects its rulers to embody decisiveness and stoicism. Yet, this king was a stark departure from that ideal. He spoke with a stutter, walked with a limp, and perspired through his garments like a trembling cleric. Born under a veil of scrutiny, he was the sole offspring of Mary, Queen of Scots, ushered into a life where love was a form of currency and paranoia ruled. Surprisingly, amidst the relentless demands of sovereignty, James sought solace not in triumph or marriage but in the tender embrace of male companionship. His affections blossomed conspicuously, notably for George Villiers, a striking figure who inspired whispers throughout court, rumored to possess a beauty that could redeem biblical texts. Younger and fervently ambitious, Villiers captured James' heart, evoking letters filled with longing where James referred to him as his wife and sweet child. In a time when such sentiments were already peculiar, their bond became startling. They resided in adjacent rooms, exchanged extravagant gifts that unsettled Parliament, and James bestowed upon Villiers a succession of titles, ultimately crowning him Duke of Buckingham, the kingdom's mightiest figure after the king himself. Despite whispers from ministers suggesting that a king's affections should remain discreet, James responded defiantly, quipping that Christ had his John, and he had his George, an assertion met with expected outrage. Historians, preferring a sanitized tale of heterosexuality, merely labeled their bond as friendship or brotherhood. Yet, how many brothers seal their correspondence with proclamations of eternal devotion, scented with perfume? How many closest confidants enjoy lavish gifts, grand palaces, or entire fleets curated for their journeys together? James' union with and of Denmark was pragmatically political but emotionally stifled. His offspring were born of obligation, lacking genuine desire. Amidst the court's whispers and Europe speculation, James remained unbothered. He was the pioneering monarch uniting England and Scotland, a blend forged in theology, tobacco, and theatricality. However, his poetry dallied with emotions of yearning for man, rather than tales of empire. While not the first royal to disrupt convention, he was unique in embracing his true self under the burdensome weight of a monarchy demanding heirs and masculine prowess. Even today, historians sidestep the truth, labeling him eccentric and emotionally reliant, cloaking his infatuations in euphemisms that clang hollow. Yet, James' treasure trove of love letters and lavish tributes left an undeniable imprint, revealing a king who lived authentically amidst rigid expectations. In a tale that stretches over centuries, we encounter George Villiers, who outlasted James by just a handful of years, ultimately meeting a cruel fate as he was assassinated by a disgruntled soldier in 1628. Whispers suggest that he passed away convinced of his own invincibility, while others speculate he took with him the well-guarded secrets of the English court. To understand the enigma of love and power, we turn to King Edward II of England, a monarch who epitomized scandal. Unlike his son, Edward III, who shattered the expectations of kingship, Edward II wove a tale of silk and sentiment woven with scandal that would come to haunt him. Born into the formidable Plantagenet line, Edward was shaped by the legacy of his warrior father, Edward I, known as the Hammer of the Scots. Yet, where his father was forged in iron, Edward II was delicate, ensnared by affection and controversy. The name at the heart of this affair was Piers Gaveston, a figure loathed by the court, marked by his foreign origins and extravagant fashion, yet inextricably linked to the king. Their bond formed when both were young, Edward, a prince, and Gaveston, a charismatic knight with perilous charm. Once enthroned, Edward elevated Gaveston from friendship to favoritism, making him a symbol of unrestrained ambition and royal decadence. Titles poured forth, and the traditional peers of the realm found themselves overshadowed by his flamboyant demeanor. Yet it was not merely titles that provoked ire, it was their profound intimacy. Chroniclers depicted their connection as otherworldly. Edward embraced Gaveston as a brother, his true companion. Together they navigated the protocols of royal life, casting aside conventional masculinity and prompting frustration within Parliament. Undeterred by the baronial opposition and their attempts at exile, Edward's affection only strengthened. Yet as fate would dictate, their tragic narrative culminated in Gaveston's violent kidnapping and execution at the hands of rebellious nobles, presenting a twisted spectacle masquerading as justice. Stricken with grief, Edward withdrew from the court, vowing vengeance. The absence of Gaveston left a cavernous void that Edward attempted to fill with Hugh Despenser the Younger, who followed a similar, more ruthless pattern of favoritism, elevating relations that further incited noble discontent. As tension escalated, so did the disintegration of Edward's marriage to Isabella of France. Clever and strategic, Isabella faced the humiliation of her husband's disregard. Ultimately, her disloyalty culminated in a rebellion bolstered by a French army. Edward II's undoing was swift. He was captured, forced to vacate the throne in favor of his son, and imprisoned. Although the specifics of his demise remain shrouded in mystery, it is said to reflect the brutal tenderness of his reign. Some historians even postulate that Edward might have slipped into obscurity, silently living out his last days far from the judgmental eye of a kingdom that cast him aside. Yet, perhaps the true enigma lies not in his passing but in the audacity with which he loved, openly and unabashedly. Edward's reign was marked not by warfare or political shrewdness but by emotional sincerity, a defiance that history has not forgotten. Edward did not merely leave behind a troubled legacy. Instead, he posed a riddle. What is to be said of a king who, while donned in a crown, shunned the armor of tradition? The answer might echo in the life of Ludwig of Bavaria, an empress who constructed dreams and spaces rather than kingdoms, sharing with Edward the longing for unreachable companionship. If this narrative has piqued your curiosity, you are undoubtedly among those drawn to hidden stories of history. Click that subscribe button to journey further into the overlooked chapters of our past. And while we contemplate these regal tragedies, share with us where you are tuning in from and the time within your own realm as we pause to reflect between these captivating royal sagas. 3. King Ludwig I of Bavaria. It is evident that Ludwig was a man out of time, a sovereign of the 19th century who possessed the spirit of a medieval troubadour. This Bavarian monarch favored swans over soldiers and opera over order, finding little joy in royal responsibilities and growing frustrated with the machinations of his ministers. Yet, it was beauty that truly captivated him, the beauty of art, architecture, nature, and the young men who traversed his existence like ethereal sculptures. Ludwig did not conceal his desires. Instead, he cloaked them in layers of myth, marble, and melody. While others chased power, he pursued Wagner, whom he called his closest friend, pouring funds into the composer's operatic endeavors with abandon. In his time, Ludwig constructed fantastical castles like Neuschwanstein and Linderhof, yet he was equally devoted to penning intimate letters, hundreds, addressed to actors, servants, soldiers, and stable boys. These letters revealed a king whose affection often bordered on the overly tender. One letter to his aide, Richard Hornig, read, "I have longed for your voice and smile. This separation is more painful than I expected." Another to the charming Paul von Thurn und Taxis was filled with poetic declarations and personal tokens, stating, "Only with you can I be myself." For a monarch so intent on avoiding the trappings of politics, these correspondences were his domain for unfiltered expression. Among his aides were the equerries, young officers assisting Ludwig in his daily affairs, whom he referred to as my angels. One, named Alois, was the king's cherished companion, described as the angel of my life. Their exchanged letters pulsed with emotional dependency and romantic yearning, revealing the poignant ache of love repressed and distorted by social hierarchies. Ludwig's fascination was not purely emotional, it was aesthetic. His surroundings were adorned with portraits of youthful men, depicting them as knights, saints, and mythic figures. His private spaces brimmed with evocative imagery, Greco-Roman statues and theatrical relics, blurring the lines between fantasy and reality, or perhaps highlighting the fact that those lines never existed. To his ministers, Ludwig epitomized a nightmare, elusive, extravagant, and more withdrawn with each passing day. He shunned council sessions, neglected his duties, and redirected funds toward grand castles and elaborate costumes rather than roads or armies. Weeks could pass as he roamed the Alps, crafting letters to trusted confidants dreaming of operatic tales where kings were noble and love was fearlessly reciprocated. However, in 1886, the state acted, declaring him insane without a medical assessment and confining him under house arrest. Just days later, his lifeless body was discovered in Lake Starnberg, the circumstances shrouded in uncertainty. Officially deemed a drowning, unofficially, it stands as an unsolved mystery. Ludwig, a skilled swimmer, had no witnesses to his demise. The only other individual present that fateful night, his psychiatrist, also perished. In an instant, the Swan King of Bavaria disappeared beneath the water's surface, leaving a legacy etched in stone, illuminated by candlelight, and murmured through the lines of his letters. Yet, perhaps Ludwig had already surrendered to the shadows long before that fateful evening, realizing that to reign as the king he truly desired meant becoming a ghost in his own domain. And if Ludwig embodied a spectral presence draped in velvet and moonlight, then Frederick the Great contrasted as a different spirit entirely, a monarch who buried his heart alongside his beloved and donned silence as his crown, a Prussian king who commanded with precision yet loved with reckless abandon, forever haunted by a world that forced him to choose between love and duty. In this unfolding tale, we delve into the life of King Frederick the Great of Prussia, originally known as Fritz. Before the title of Great was bestowed upon him, he was merely a sensitive boy with a passion for the flute, characterized by his powdered curls and a rebellious spirit. Born in 1712 to a stern father who deemed poetry a poison and foreign philosophies an affliction, Frederick's upbringing was one of emotional desolation, where affection was scarce, doled out as cautiously as gunpowder, and manliness was defined by harsh discipline over vulnerability. His father, Frederick William I, was the ultimate authoritarian, a king enamored with military might, determined to forge a towering army of giants simply for admiration. In stark contrast, Young Frederick found solace in the works of Voltaire, crafting sonatas instead of rallying men to battle. Such preferences did not sit well with his father. Under the suffocating weight of emotional repression, Frederick faced brutal punishment for his scholarly pursuits, living in a world where any display of tenderness was mocked and chastised. He was even subjected to a cruel training of sorts, forced to watch public executions, an effort to instill the toughness that his father deemed essential. But rebellious spirits cannot remain confined. At just 18, Frederick attempted to escape Prussia with his dear friend, Hans Hermann von Ada, who some believe was more than just a companion. Their bold attempt was met with tragedy. The two were caught. While Frederick faced imprisonment, von Ada did not escape the gallows. He knelt in despair before execution while Frederick could do nothing but watch helplessly from his cell. In that grim moment, history tells us he shuddered, howling in grief, and in the wake of this loss, not even the name would pass his lips again. In the aftermath of his father's death, Frederick took the throne, embarking on a journey to reshape Prussia into a formidable military force. Yet, beneath the surface of a commander who swiftly conquered Silesia, lay the heart of a dreamer, a man who erected Sans Souci, a summer retreat echoing the French term for without care. Here, he entwined himself with artists and philosophers, establishing deep bonds that were reflected in his private letters, filled with playful banter and emotional liaisons. His correspondence with Voltaire sparkled with keen wit, leading to speculation as to whether Frederick was attempting romance or merely trying to impress with his scholarly prowess. However, the most intimate presence in Frederick's life wasn't Voltaire, but rather his valet, Michael Gabriel Fredersdorf. This former soldier enjoyed close access to Frederick's world, with privileges that sparked silent rumors about their relationship. The bond between them was whispered about yet rarely addressed in historical accounts. Frederick never donned the face of a conventional monarch. Instead, he embraced solitude with his dogs and books and expressed his wish to rest beside them instead of in the royal family crypt. When Frederick passed in 1786, he left behind a realm significantly larger than the one he inherited. Yet he also left behind a collection of letters that unveil a man grappling with the weight of expectation. In poignant self-reflection, he remarked, "I was born to a station that condemned me to act a part that I did not choose." The conqueror he was meant to be clashed with the companion he longed to become. Even as his reign sparkled with conquests, his private life thrived in the shadows, marked by secret notes, hidden gardens, and unspoken affections. Rather than viewing Frederick solely as a tragic figure, we must instead recognize him as a shrewd orchestrator of political strategy and personal secrecy, crafting a dynasty while suppressing his true self beneath stone and marble. Yet, where Frederick cloaked his affections in sonatas and strategies, the legendary Alexander the Great carved his legacy into history with blades and monumental statues, his bond with another man resonating loudly across time, so profound that the very cities were named in their honor. 5. King Alexander the Great. Often recounted as a figure who never tasted defeat, Alexander of Macedon triumphed against foes, empires, and the very terrain he traversed. At a mere 20, he ascended to a kingdom. By 32, he commanded an empire extending from Greece to India. Yet, for Alexander, this was never sufficient. Bound by an insatiable lust for conquest and deeply preoccupied with the legacy he would leave, his life became entwined with that of Hephaestion. These two souls were bound from childhood: Alexander, the destined king, and Hephaestion, the loyal companion. Together, they were schooled under the great mind of Aristotle, galloped into battle side by side, and immersed themselves in the epics of Homer. The Iliad inspired them, framing their lives within the powerful narratives of Achilles and Patroclus. In Alexander's eyes, he embodied Achilles, making Hephaestion indelibly his Patroclus. The comparison could not be missed, and neither could Alexander's flamboyant nature. Hephaestion was far more than a mere general to Alexander. He was the one man Alexander could confide in during a time when trust was as perilous as open wounds. Amid a court fostered with aspiring rivals, Hephaestion stood unwaveringly next to him, not hidden in the shadows. He commanded elite cavalry units, undertook significant diplomatic tasks, and even delivered important letters to kings far from home. Hephaestion was essential, a force that rounded out his king's complexities. Their connection, relayed in fragments from Greek and Roman writings, pulsated with intensity, openly expressing a deep emotional bond. They shared attire, dined in each other's company, and when tragedy struck with Hephaestion's sudden illness and death in 324 BC, the rumblings of Alexander's grief echoed through history. His anguish was more than a reaction, it was a cataclysm. He fasted, disheveled his hair in mourning, and reportedly went days without sustenance. He commanded the construction of an enormous funeral pyre, towering 50 stories high, glinting with gold and adorned with statues, while forbidding music in his lands and demanding a period of grieving across his empire. Then, in an act of unparalleled devotion, he declared Hephaestion to be a god, not a metaphor or a grandiose gesture, but a sanctioned divine status. A city blossomed in his memory, Antigonia transformed into Hephaestionopolis, and oracles were charged with including Hephaestion in their prayers. This was not merely honor, it was the manifestation of obsession, solidified in marble and flame. Alexander didn't just grieve, he elevated Hephaestion to divine status. Historians have pondered the nature of their bond through the ages, often with hesitation, as if fearing the truth that lay beneath the surface. Some called it a profound friendship, while others insinuated a deeper spiritual connection. Yet, ancient narratives tell a clearer tale. The philosopher Diogenes Laertius straightforwardly proclaimed that Alexander loved Hephaestion above all others. Plutarch likened their bond directly to that of Achilles and Patroclus, a pairing steeped in tragedy, unwavering loyalty, and suppressed emotions within the epic poetic tradition. This ambiguity carries weight, for Alexander embodied contradictions. He was a relentless warrior, reciting poetry before battles, a king who conquered Persia yet embraced its customs, a ruler who left no heir, for none could fill the void left by Hephaestion. In truth, much of his empire became an edifice of grief rather than sheer ambition. After Hephaestion's demise, Alexander's spirit began to wane. His campaigns continued, but they exhibited the erratic nature of a man unraveling. He drank heavily, slept fitfully, and exhibited unpredictable outbursts. Some whispered he had lost his divine radiance, while others speculated he sought death itself, yearning to reunite with Hephaestion once more. Less than a year later, in Babylon, Alexander breathed his last, surrounded by generals yet profoundly solitary at heart. He was 32 when he faded, devoid of a climactic battle, an assassin's blade, or a noble end, just an unexpected ailment, a quiet voice diminishing, and the weight of an empire spiraling into chaos. In his final moments, he was asked who should inherit his throne, and he murmured, "To the strongest," leading many to ponder if he was merely stalling. After all, the one individual he had genuinely trusted to govern with him was irrevocably lost. Perhaps this eternal echo of Alexander's tale reverberates through time, not solely as a story of conquests, but as a poignant love narrative, carved into ruins, twirling smoke, and names obscured by the sands of time. Despite conquering vast realms, he never overcame the void left by one cherished soul. Yet, while Alexander ruled with fervor cloaked as dominion, Prince George of Kent maneuvered through the intricate gardens of 20th century Britain, gliding through salons and scandals, revealing a royal presence that was never quite as it appeared. In the shadowed corridors of British royalty, Prince George, Duke of Kent, emerges like a figure shrouded in a mysterious Art Deco haze. The younger sibling of kings Edward VII and George V, and an uncle to Queen Elizabeth II, George navigated the stiff elegance of Buckingham Palace as if rehearsing for an entirely different narrative. With a name that resided among the elite, he emanated charm, style, and an aura that hinted he wasn't adhering to the conventional royal playbook. Born in 1902 as the fifth child of King George V and Queen Mary, his household was emblematic of restraint rather than warmth. While his siblings conformed to expected royal archetypes, George embraced a uniquely ambiguous identity. Blessed with matinee idol looks and the grace of a diplomat, he glided through a world rich with glamour but often untouched by official records. Despite the suitors and strategic marriages proposed to him, alliances with princesses and noble women never fully captured his heart. Instead, persistent whispers trailed him, hinting at the company he embraced, the eclectic salons he frequented, and the late-night parties that lingered until dawn. Be it in Paris, Berlin, or London, the same name surfaced. Figures like playwright Noel Coward and South American diplomat Jose Uriburu, embodying a life existing just beyond royal propriety. Chroniclers of his life employed polite ambiguities to describe George's complexity, his sophisticated tastes and unconventional circles. Yet those who crossed his path sensed the deeper truth. George didn't merely defy convention, he rendered it irrelevant. He had the charisma to sway a prime minister in daylight and slip into a chaotic bohemian soiree at the witching hour. The discussions surrounding his sexuality weren't mere gossip. They were documented in private journals, police files, and confidential notes, now hidden within the royal archives. Some narratives speak of profound bonds with male companions, while others directly reference discreet liaisons in luxurious hotels, theatres, and art studios, all starkly contrasting the crown's preferred image of dignity and norm. Even his marriage to Princess Marina of Greece appeared to be a well-matched facade, bringing forth 3 children but masking an emotional chasm noted behind palace doors. It seemed George preserved portions of himself, not from shame but perhaps from wisdom, understanding the weight of transparency in a lineage defined by secrecy. As World War II unfolded, George recommitted to the Royal Air Force, an act of duty or perhaps a means of escape. Yet fate had its own narrative twist. On August 25, 1942, tragedy struck as his plane crashed in the Scottish Highlands, his life extinguished at just 39. Officially labelled an accident, whispers resurrected about the nature of his flight, possible secrets, and who might have accompanied him. The investigation was superficial, leaving questions unanswered and speculation swirling like fog in the aftermath of his untimely demise. Prince George departed without memoirs or confessions, leaving behind mere fragments, meticulously penned letters, photographs captured with hands too close, and friendships that hinted at deeper truths. His legacy continued to challenge royal convention even in his absence. If George was the spectral presence haunting 20th century Britain, then Philip of Olong illuminated the grand halls of Versailles, a man adorned with pearls and lavishly romantic in his quest for love, reflecting the opulence of France in his every gesture. Philip I, Duke of Orleans, occupied the golden halls of Versailles, a realm where chandeliers cascaded like frozen waterfalls and political maneuvering was as intricate as lace. Yet, one figure outshined the rest, Philippe himself. Younger brother to King Louis XIV, he was a man who embraced his true self in an era where authenticity often proved perilous. In 17th century France, being oneself, especially while adorned in makeup and lavish gowns, and openly cherishing beautiful young men, was a perilous endeavour. Born in 1640 and affectionately dubbed Monsieur, Philippe grew up in the illustrious shadow of his elder brother. Louis XIV epitomized absolute power, stern, divine, and precisely composed. Conversely, Philippe was softer, flamboyantly attired, and perhaps too dramatic. While Louis commanded armies with orchestral harmony, Philippe cultivated an affinity for wigs, hosted lavish masquerades, and openly flirted with handsome courtiers. Stunningly handsome in his own right, he embraced attire traditionally deemed feminine, silks, dazzling headdresses, and a hint of rouge, dressing to outshine even Versailles itself. Still, his audacity came with a grace masked in royal enjoyment, combined with a knowing nod to those who dared to judge him. The court could only tolerate such flamboyance as long as it aligned with their needs. He was a royal prince, a soldier when it served him, and crucially, a twice-married man. His first union with Princess Henrietta of England masqueraded as diplomacy but was instead rife with mutual indifference and secret affections elsewhere. When Henrietta passed away unexpectedly, rumors surrounding Philippe and his male lovers swirled like smoke in the Grand Hall. His second marriage to Elizabeth Charlotte, affectionately referred to as Lisa Lot, proved more functional. They shared a friendship where honesty prevailed. She candidly noted Philippe's numerous romantic affairs with young men, prominently highlighting his relationship with the notorious Chevalier de Lorraine. A man of charm and cunning, the Chevalier thrived in the ambience of Versailles, wielding influence that rivaled those of royal blood. His bond with Philippe was both intimate and perilous, igniting admiration and ire across the court. When objections from Philippe's wife led to the Chevalier's exile, Philippe's torment became palpable, prompting even Louis XIV to reconsider the banishment. Upon the Chevalier's return, the tempo of gossip resumed its lively rhythm amidst merriments. Philippe was unabashed about his passions, gliding through scandal as though it were a dance, embodying the spirit of defiance against societal norms. Yet, underneath the flamboyant exterior lay a tactical military commander. His prowess on the battlefield was notably evident during the Battle of Cassel, where he showcased strategic brilliance. This juxtaposition bewildered his critics. How could a man adorned in pearls lead an army? Herein lay the essence of Philippe's existence, challenging the binary perceptions of power and elegance. He encapsulated both, defying labels, a soldier and a socialite, a sibling to the Sun King yet a mirror reflecting the unspoken secrets of Versailles. Ultimately, Philippe's legacy transcends mere politics. It is a tale of resilience. He carved out a niche in a world hostile to his existence, unrepentantly living his truth in vibrant splendor, relishing the freedom to love openly and dress as he chose. As whispers circulated behind elegantly held fans, the palpable longing within the royal court was eternally immortalized, much like the statues and temples dedicated to Hadrian's beloved Antinous, an enduring grief that became an intrinsic part of the empire itself. 8. Hadrian, the esteemed Roman emperor, did not seek to expand his empire through conquest. Instead, he concentrated on its fortification. After years of Rome stretching its influence like an insatiable lung, consuming diverse lands and cultures, Hadrian erected walls, solid structures built from stone, bearing the unspoken declaration, "This is as far as we will go." In stark contrast to his empire-obsessed predecessors, Hadrian's passions lay in aesthetics, structure, order, and harmony. Amidst the remnants of his reign, the policies and grand columns, unfolds a deeply personal narrative. It's a tale not to be found on geographical charts but sculpted in marble, echoed in poetry, and encased in the memory of a single youth, Antinous. Understanding Hadrian requires comprehension of Antinous, a connection that remains one of history's most profound and mysterious. Antinous hailed from Bethany, in modern-day Turkey. Strikingly handsome, athletic, and introverted, he encountered Hadrian during adolescence, quickly becoming his cherished companion, not merely a servant or a footnote, but a significant presence, a source of inspiration. Ancient records subtly acknowledge Antinous with the kind of poetic vagueness reserved for enigmatic relationships. He is described as beloved, favored, dear, yet the remnants of Roman history tell a compellingly different, louder tale. Hadrian's sorrow upon Antinous' death was not just profound, it was transformative. The young man's drowning in the Nile in 130 AD was officially deemed accidental, but theories circulated, whispers of ritual sacrifice and the darker idea of suicide. The aftermath was unmistakable. A heartbroken Hadrian sought to create anew. He founded a city near the site of Antinous' drowning, named Antinopolis, a lasting tribute cast in enduring marble. Across the empire, statues of Antinous emerged in abundance, depicted as a deity, a hero, a celestial being, something never before done for a common youth. This devotion was both intimate and public. Hadrian willed the world to remember and, intriguingly, to love Antinous as well. He established a cult in the youth's honor, minted coins bearing his likeness, and inspired poets and artists who envision him as figures like Apollo and Osiris. The clear message conveyed was not mere grief. This was intent to forge a remarkable legacy. Hadrian, the master architect, transmuted memory into monumental infrastructure. However, back in Rome, uncertainty loomed. The Senate felt the tremors of unease. The court found themselves incredulous. No previous emperor had shown such lavish devotion to a mere companion of modest background, especially one seemingly lacking political utility. Yet, Hadrian offered no explanations or defenses. Instead, he continued commissioning grand sculptures and dedicating festivals in Antinous' name throughout his life. It's crucial to note, Hadrian was not a man swayed by sentiment. Cunning and sharp, he restructured military forces, centralized governance, and meticulously codified laws. He controversially rebuilt and renamed Jerusalem, optimizing the Roman infrastructure across Europe. Yet, in his relationship with Antinous, all that pragmatic approach dissolved into something almost mythical. Modern historians have endeavored to reinterpret this narrative. Some label it a performance of political drama, while others dismiss it as imperial quirks. However, standing in the Vatican museums or the Louvre, gazing upon the essence of Antinous captured in marble, eternally youthful, forever distant, provokes recognition of a love too profound to be concealed. Hadrian's life would conclude 8 years post-Antinous' demise. By then, his reign was defined by cultural richness and consolidation, a rare moment in the relentless Roman pursuit of conquest. Yet beneath this political narrative lies a more personal legacy, an emperor who loved deeply and resiliently refused to let history erase that affection. In contrast, William Rufus of England etched his mysteries into silence. A flamboyant sovereign with no heirs and a court filled with striking men, his demise still lingers, cloaked with an aura of royal intrigue and potential cover-up. 9. King William II, often known as Rufus, is a figure shrouded in obscurity and suspicion, his legacy marred by the shadows of history. Reigning from 1087 until 1100, he inherited the throne from his formidable father, William the Conqueror. While his brother Henry is remembered for his virtues, William Rufus has long been categorized as problematic. He seemed to live a life riddled with contradictions, never marrying, never producing heirs, and displaying scant interest in women, to the dismay of his court. His extravagant lifestyle, marked by favoritism and luxury, drew the ire of the church, leading chroniclers, primarily monks, to disapprove of his relationships with youthful courtiers, perceived as excessive and unkingly. Behind the royal curtains of his glittering court, rumors swirled, a king whose life was a tapestry woven with intrigue and controversy. The church viewed him as a provocateur, defying expectations, heavily taxing clergy, and delaying the appointment of archbishops. For many chroniclers, his court was a nest of sin, with insinuations of unchaste behavior that ignited medieval imaginations, resulting in accusations that have lingered through the ages. Despite dismissals of these claims as mere exaggerations, the constant discomfort surrounding his private life raises questions about the truth behind the throne. Unpopular among clergy and barons alike, William's lack of marriage created uncertainty over succession, further complicating his reign. His close ties with certain young men, like the swift-rising Ranflamet, sparked enmity and resentment, brewing danger beneath the surface. Then came that fateful day on August 2nd, 1100, in the New Forest, where William was discovered, an arrow lodged in his chest. Officially deemed an accident, an errant shot from the bow of Walter Tyrrell, the circumstances felt unsettling. Peasants found the king's body, not his trusted men, and Tyrrell's immediate flight from the realm fueled suspicions. Within mere days, Henry, his younger brother, seized the crown, an act steeped in medieval intrigue that leaves us questioning if foul play was afoot. So, what was concealed? A monarchy at odds with the prevailing order, or a king whose vibrant life made his rule troublesome? William Rufus departed without leaving heirs, without a consort, and with a legacy that stood in stark contrast to the Church's expectations of monarchy. He left behind a tapestry of unanswered questions about his court's true nature, the reasons for his isolation, and the fate marked by that fateful arrow. Ultimately, he ruled defiantly, unmarried and bold, during a time demanding conformity, revealing that perhaps the greatest offense was simply his refusal to submit. As William's life unfolded and ended in an English forest, Umberto II of Italy witnessed his monarchy crumble not at the hands of an assassin, but through whispers, resignations, and the silent, aching detachment of a king who never fully returned to power. King Umberto II of Italy, a figure cast in a role he could never truly enact, reigned for a mere 34 days in 1946, a period shorter than most modern leases. His moniker, the May King, carries an innocent charm until one learns it serves as an epitaph. By the time he donned the crown, the monarchy was already in decline. Alongside it, a constructed narrative of masculinity, identity, and intimacy was also unraveling, one that Umberto had subtly begun to rewrite long before ascending to the throne. Born in 1904 to King Victor Emmanuel III and Queen Elena of Montenegro, Umberto grew up in an environment filled with reflection and distortion. His father maintained a conservative distance while ruling amid a backdrop of political upheaval. The House of Savoy, once a formidable bastion of European royalty, gradually lost its influence, credibility, and vision for the future. Within this tumultuous setting, Umberto's formative years were carefully curated for public approval. He was shaped into an ideal military leader and showcased as a dutiful prince, perfectly embodying the archetype of an upright, undeniably heterosexual Italian nobleman. Yet, the reality was quite different. Whispers followed him, hinting at close friendships with male colleagues during his time in the military and late-night gatherings filled with affection, all hidden from public scrutiny. While his official narrative spotlighted his sense of duty, insiders perceived a palpable emotional distance from women and a distinctive comfort with his male counterparts. His marriage to Princess Maria José of Belgium in 1930 appeared as a dynastic victory, a match crafted for stability, Catholic, attractive, and well-networked. But this relationship, rather brittle, revealed itself as a mere performance. They often found themselves apart, with their emotional disconnection becoming evident. Maria José famously remarked they were more akin to siblings than spouses, a devastating observation in a monarchy desperate to create not just heirs, but a facade. They had 4 children, the necessary heirs, but their marriage felt like an arrangement suspended in time. While Maria José passionately engaged in anti-fascist endeavors, Umberto seemed trapped in a royal limbo, too traditional for her bold actions yet too ambiguous to fulfill the public's expectations. The rise of Mussolini and the war, followed by the swift decline of Italy's monarchy, guided this narrative to a climax. Under tremendous strain, Victor Emmanuel III relinquished power to Umberto in 1944, hoping he could salvage the tarnished image of the crown. But it was far too late. The 1946 referendum that abolished the monarchy saw Umberto as king for just over a month, and although he never abdicated, he left without ceremony, retreating to Portugal for the rest of his days. A king stripped of his kingdom, a nominal husband, and ultimately a man liberated from the facade he had long upheld. In exile, Umberto found a different kind of comfort, away from the watchful eyes of the public and the constraints of royal expectations. Guests at his villa observed the elegant, cultured company he kept, men who seemed more than mere acquaintances. European circles whispered about him, some in sympathy, others, predictably, with disdain. Nevertheless, royal silence prevailed. No scandals, no disputes, simply a quiet fade into obscurity and perhaps a newfound authenticity. When he passed in 1983, he was laid to rest not in Italy, but at Hautecombe Abbey in France, far from the palatial heritage of his youth, a monarchy reduced to a distant memory, existing only in textbooks and tabloids. Yet, questions remain. Who was he truly, and what sort of king might he have been if history and circumstance had afforded him authenticity? If Umberto walked away from his royal stage, Crown Prince Rudolf of Austria tightly clung to the script, ultimately realizing he was cast in a role ill-suited for someone like him. Crown Prince Rudolf of Austria entered the world not just as a boy but as a harbinger of power, the sole heir to Emperor Franz Joseph I and the enigmatic Empress Elizabeth, who was known as Cease. He was more than a mere child. He embodied the hope of an empire wrestling with its own elaborate traditions. Yet, deeper than the royal facade lay a man torn by contradictions, both brilliant and melancholic, politically forward-thinking yet emotionally fragile, wrestling with obligations that stifled him. From an early age, Rudolf stood apart. Sensitive and reflective, he shunned the militaristic ideals expected of him, preferring exploration in science and social reform. His mind was filled with the ideas of Darwin and liberal thinkers, awakening a desire for change that his world wasn't ready to embrace. His education, steeped in rigid discipline, was overseen by tutors keen on quashing his individuality, insisting that an emperor must never show vulnerability or question authority. Despite the confines of his upbringing, Rudolf's spirit rebelled. At first quietly, then with greater courage, he sought solace among writers and artists, building relationships that stepped outside the boundaries set by the Habsburg court. In private, he fostered profound emotional bonds with male companions. Letters from this period reveal a contrasting inner life, revealing a man yearning not just for freedom but for true intimacy. One name frequently found in his letters is Count Joseph Hyos, a confidant crucial to his emotional world. The tone of their correspondence raises eyebrows among historians, hinting at feelings that skirt the edges of romantic affection. In the sanitized narratives of imperial history, such nuances often get minimized to terms like close friendship. Yet the curiosity lingers, for Rudolf's tale captivates not through scandal but through a profound solitude living within a bustling palace. He was a prince expected to personify strength but choking on the absence of gentleness. Tasked with nurturing the future of an empire, he seemed to seek love amid a history that overlooked such desires. His cold marriage to Princess Stephanie of Belgium was more about diplomacy than emotional connection. Their bond quickly deteriorated, even as they had a daughter. Stephanie would later portray him as both affectionate and tormented, a man constantly pulled by the weight of expectations. As the years pressed on, the strain took its toll. Health issues emerged, insomnia, migraines, and what were simply termed nervous disorders, the stress driving him to drink heavily and confide only in a select few male attendants who offered him the companionship he so desperately needed. However, these fleeting moments of peace could never fully quench the crushing pressures. By his late 20s, disillusionment engulfed Rudolf. Disenchanted with the monarchy and possibly with his own life, he found himself a reformer with no platform, a prince with no desirable path ahead. The circumstances surrounding the end of his life remained fraught with mystery and speculation, much like the man himself, an emotionally obscured figure who challenged the status quo. Official records paint him as defined by a singular tragic event, but this perspective fails to encompass the complexity of a man yearning for recognition and love beyond his royal constraints. If Rudolf was a prince slowly unraveling amid opulence, then Prince Eugen of Savoy represented something altogether different, a figure embodying elegance and artistry, building his legacy not through scandal but through a steadfast dedication to the world of art. 12. Prince Eugen of Savoy, a name that resonates through the corridors of military history as an enigma. With the appearance of a courtly poet yet commanding armies with the ferocity of a war deity, Eugen's life was a paradox. Born in Paris in 1663, his journey began with exile, steeped in scandal and distrust. Despite these trials, he emerged as one of Austria's most formidable military strategists, blending the arts of warfare with a passion for antiquities collected under the cloak of night. He triumphed over the Ottomans in the east and outmaneuvered the French in the west, yet his personal life painted a different picture. With no spouse or heirs to speak of, he surrounded himself with an ever-changing entourage of youthful aides, accomplices in both battles and lavish soirees. His duality was apparent. He commissioned libraries and fortresses with the same fervor, donned powdered wigs into combat, and inscribed military decrees with the same hand as his love sonnets, crafted in Italian. Eugen hailed from the French aristocracy, but the Sun King, Louis XIV, turned his back. The reasons, veiled in polite discourse, hinted at perceived frailties, an alleged lack of physical prowess and a temperament that was ill-suited for the ecclesiastical path. Nevertheless, beneath it all lay a deeper truth. Eugen simply did not fit the mold. Unyielding in intellect and resistant to the constraints of courtly life, France ultimately declined his service. His fortunes changed when he turned to Vienna, where opportunity awaited. In this vibrant city, Eugen forged a path that would forever alter the Habsburg military landscape. Rising to the ranks of field marshal and imperial councillor, he left behind the familial trappings that typically defined his contemporaries. His never-married status was more than an oddity. It posed questions that reverberated quietly through the courts. His inner circle consisted largely of young men, aides, secretaries, and loyal attendants, who were all drawn into his orbit, receiving unexpected rewards and privileges. Among the most notable was Count Franz von Leunghan, who stood by Eugen's side for 2 prolific decades. Though their relationship has been shadowed in secrecy, hints of deeper connections shimmer in correspondence and estate documentation, yet went largely unacknowledged. Living within the exquisitely designed Winter Palace and the Belvedere in Vienna, Eugen cultivated an aesthetic of intimacy amidst opulence, filling his surroundings with art and books while fostering an ambience of cultivated isolation. Visitors remarked on the theatrical elegance of his salons, gatherings enriched by scholars, poets, and captivating young nobles, carefully selected for their charm. Naturally, the court whispered. Yet Eugen remained insulated. His value to the empire rendered him untouchable, an intelligent tactician who maneuvered deftly through the whispers while offering little in return. He existed as a singular figure, a bachelor prince wrapped in monastic restraint and a life devoid of a spouse, a characteristic dismissed as mere eccentricity. In surviving letters, his personality shines, a blend of irony and guarded emotion, a touch of wistfulness surfacing in remarks such as, I have fought many battles, but the ones within are the most complex. A cryptic reflection. It suggests a man who mastered not only the art of war but also the complexities of identity. Upon his passing in 1736, the empire grieved the loss of a military hero and a cultural patron, yet remained unanswered with the lingering questions about the nature of his affections. Eugen was indeed a royal enigma, a remarkable man who triumphed over foes while eluding the stringent expectations of his society. While Eugen lived in silence, across the landscape of Europe, King Christian VII of Denmark would unravel before the public eye, ensnared in a complicated bond with his physician that puzzled onlookers, yet was evident to all. King Christian II of Denmark, a figure cloaked in mystery and enigma, was neither the powerful sovereign he was meant to be nor a mere vessel of authority. Born in 1749, his coronation came at the tender age of 17, into a realm rife with skepticism about his capability. His formative years were shaped by a strict upbringing that danced on the edge of cruelty, leading to erratic behavior as a young man, sudden rages entwined with prolonged silences. His adult life unfolded almost like a tragic ghost story, with many speaking of him while few truly acknowledged his presence. Central to this unfolding drama was the figure of Johann Friedrich Struensee, without whom the narrative of Christian is incomplete. Their bond was politically transformative, emotionally complex, and steeped in historical ambiguity, marking one of Europe's most fascinating yet unresolved partnerships. Christian's erratic behavior sparked speculation among historians, with theories suggesting conditions akin to modern schizophrenia or severe anxiety. While no diagnosis fully encapsulated him, it was clear he struggled with emotional volatility, intense social withdrawal, and compulsive habits that complicated his royal existence. His court antics were notorious, playing pranks on nobles, making off-color remarks, and retreating into whimsical rituals reminiscent of a child. Enter Struensee, the German physician and Enlightenment scholar, who stepped into Christian's life as a personal doctor in 1768 but soon became a pivotal figure in governance. What began with medical care quickly evolved. Struensee not only managed the king's ailments but also assumed the role of a political puppet master, drafting laws, issuing edicts, and influencing council deliberations. The hesitant king, previously lost in protocol, began mirroring Struensee's words and ideologies, creating an undeniable and unsettling bond. The court couldn't help but take notice. The relationship grew too close, too fast. Christian's attention towards Struensee was palpable, as he often sought his company during meals, travel, and even in moments of rest. Amidst this, whispers of scandal swept through the Danish nobility, already incensed by Struensee's sweeping reforms that encroached upon their privileges. His influence surged. Granted access to power, he became a royal advisor, ultimately a de facto regent. Struensee's bold reforms clashed sharply with conservative sensibilities at court. He dismantled censorship, curtailed noble privileges, and sought to secularize the institutions of public life. His bond with Christian deepened, leading some to speculate whether he manipulated the king or simply understood him profoundly. Yet, this saga unfurled within the gloomy backdrop of Christian's marriage to Caroline Matilda of Great Britain. Their union was characterized by distance and formality, plagued from the start. Young, intelligent, and politically isolated, Caroline turned towards Struensee for solace, and according to most accounts, for something more. Their rumored affair morphed into a scandal that rippled across Europe, overshadowing Christian's understanding of their complicated triangle. Did he condone their bond? Or was he perhaps emotionally reliant on Struensee in ways that transcended jealousy? That unanswered query lingers, casting a shadow over this royal triptych. By 1772, the tension reached a breaking point. Struensee was arrested, accused of misusing royal authority, and executed in a harrowing display of vengeance. Caroline was exiled, while Christian, who had scarcely spoken in months, was subjected to a regency run by his stepmother and conservative nobles. Though he lived for decades more, he was a sidelined king, ensnared in a life of symbol and silence. In his twilight years, he wandered the palace, conversing with portraits, engulfed in solitude. The beloved physician was gone, as was his queen. Only the crown remained, ornate yet utterly meaningless to the fading figure beneath it. In contrast to Christian's shadowy existence, King Henry III of France strode through court adorned in lace, ruffles, and eyeliner, a monarch who wielded a fan in one hand and a dagger in the other, defiantly overturning every convention of royal masculinity. To truly grasp the essence of King Henry III of France, one must delve into a paradox adorned in royal finery. He was a monarch who both bowed reverently before sacred icons and reveled in a life of vibrant festivity, where fasting coexisted with flamboyant flirtations. Commanding armies by day, he surrounded himself with a retinue of exquisitely attired young men, known as lemons, embodying the very duality he represented. His reign unfolded amidst the brutal storms of France's religious wars, and intriguingly, he earned as much scorn for his extravagant wardrobe as he did for his governance failures. Detractors labeled him overly Catholic, too indulgent, vain, and peculiar. Yet, beneath the surface, darker whispers accompanied his legacy. Too effeminate, overly dramatic, and too attached to his male favorites. Born in 1551 to King Henry II and Catherine de' Medici as their fourth son, Henry was not destined for the throne. However, fortune took a sharp turn when the untimely passes of his brothers paved his path to ascendance first in Poland and then France in 1574. From his very first days as king, controversy thrived, primarily regarding his public persona rather than political strategies. Unlike his predecessors, donning armor and paternal authority, Henry preferred the softness of velvet slippers and the finesse of perfumed gloves. His meticulous grooming became a spectacle, with daily outfit alterations, powdered visage, and elegantly curled hair that raised eyebrows even among courtiers. The court watched and scrutinized as Henry's daily rituals unfolded like theatrical performances. And then, there were the minions, a term embodying more than mere friendship. These were Henry's trusted young noblemen, adorned with sartorial flair, dramatic attitudes, and unwavering loyalty. They were not mere attendants, they were extensions of the king's essence. They vied for his favor with Jules, attended events by his side, and were rumored to share deeply intimate times with him. Scandals proliferated as contemporaries reacted with indignation. Not just courtiers, these minions represented the intimate circles that formed Henry's emotional core. His compassionate letters to them revealed a bond that transcended simple camaraderie. The gravity of their untimely deaths affected him deeply, prompting public displays of grief. Henry, while at times attempting to cultivate a facade of masculinity through hunting and loyalty to the Catholic League, could not escape the firm grip of public perception, the image of a king whose affections disrupted the expected order. Remarkably, despite his tumultuous reign and France's descent into religious warfare, the focus frequently remained on his fashion choices and his unconventional entourage. People seemed more willing to accept violence than the allure of beauty. In 1589, Henry III met his end at the hands of a religious zealot. His assassination marked the conclusive end of the Valois dynasty, which had governed France for centuries. In its wake, the Bourbon line would emerge, introducing a more austere era of ruling monarchs. Yet, Henry's legacy endured, woven into the very fabric of his life, a vivid tapestry of power intertwined with pleasure. He embodied a remarkable refusal to choose between dominion and desire, discipline and indulgence. While history might strive to depict him in simplistic terms, The reality of his life was far more complex, a narrative rich with tragedy, theatricality, and resilient defiance. Just as Henry III transformed royal existence into an enigmatic spectacle, so too did Grand Duke Sergei Alexandrovich of Russia learn to master silence, concealing secrets beneath layers of imperial duty and unvoiced truths. In the realm of Russian nobility, few figures cast as enigmatic a shadow as Grand Duke Sergei Alexandrovich. Unlike many royals whose words can create intrigue, Sergei's silence spoke volumes. A member of the storied Romanov lineage, his life was a tapestry woven from threads of privilege and heartbreak. His existence flowed like a hushed symphony, marked by duty devoid of warmth, a loveless marriage, and friendships that thrived beneath societal expectations. Although he never bore the mantle of ruler, his presence lingered in the halls of power, shrouded in a veneer of stoicism and devotion that masked the true man within. Born in 1857, Sergei was the fifth son of Emperor Alexander II, a reformer destined to meet a tragic end. The Romanovs, a dynasty full of paradoxes, autocrats with a hint of liberal thought, saw Sergei embrace a path set apart from most of his kin. He was known for his rigidity and deep devotion. Even in his youth, his serious and introspective demeanor set him apart. Engulfed in religion and the order of formality, he found solace in restraint, yet whispers of rumors trailed him. Unlike his peers, he delayed marriage until the age of 36, choosing an artistic and spiritual life over the traditional noble matches offered to him. In a seemingly perfect union, Sergei married Princess Elizabeth of Hesse, a granddaughter of Queen Victoria who converted to Orthodox Christianity. However, behind the facade of their shared noble heritage was an emotionally distant relationship. Elizabeth later remarked their bond was one of spiritual admiration rather than romantic fervor, devoid of children and physical intimacy. Instead, Sergei nurtured deep emotional ties with male companions, especially his younger brother, Pavel, surrounding himself with those who understood his reserved nature. Their connections transcended mere friendship, as Sergei showered them with gifts and leaned heavily upon their support, all in secrecy amidst an empire of decorum. As Governor-General of Moscow, Sergei's public life reflected an increasing conservatism. His harsh measures against dissenters and nonconformists earned him both fear and contempt. He upheld rigid doctrines, abolishing entertainment on sacred days and exiling opponents, earning him a dual reputation as either a fanatic or a principled leader. Yet, beneath this authoritarian exterior lay a man whose emotional life was a tightly held enigma, with his inner turmoil growing as Russia teetered on the brink of collapse. The cracks started to reveal themselves as the empire spiraled into chaos. Revolutionary fervor declared Sergei a symbol of tyrannical rule. On February 17, 1905, his life met with a violent end when a bomb was hurled into his carriage in Moscow, shattering the silence that enveloped his existence. This act was a harbinger, one of the earliest assassinations of the new century, heralding disarray for the Romanovs. His widow, Princess Elizabeth, forsook her royal standing for monastic life, founding a convent before meeting her tragic fate in 1918 at the hands of the Bolsheviks, echoing Sergei's own demise. What Sergei withheld from the world remains resonant, a testament to his hidden emotions and unexpressed truths. In the shadowy confines of ritual and expectation, stillness prevailed. The heart of his life, if it existed, lay not with his wife or titles, but elsewhere, nurtured in letters, unsaid affections, and the unspoken tales the Romanovs wished to keep locked away. Amidst this frozen facade stood Sergei like a statue, even as his contemporary, Tsar Peter III, found himself ridiculed for fragility, surrounded by confidants more trusted than authority itself. Peter III of Russia, a figure marked by intrigue, was an outsider before he ever donned the imperial crown. A foreign-born ruler, He voiced more in German than in Russian, possessing an affinity for toy soldiers over the rigors of war councils. His reign, a fleeting 6 months, left behind a legacy that raises as many questions as it answers. Underneath the laughter and discontent lies a man whose personal life and peculiarities challenge the narrative of his rule. Born Karl Peter Ulrich in 1728 in Kiel, Germany, he was the grandson of Peter the Great, destined to ascend the Russian Empire. Yet the Russian court, typically unwelcoming to outsiders, looked upon him with scorn. Rather than embodying the robust vigor expected of a ruler, Peter appeared as an eccentric observer, more captivated by miniature armies and music than the complex machinations of authority. His matrimonial alliance with Catherine, later known as Catherine the Great, was hardly one of affection. Portrayed as childish and detached, Peter's inability to connect left Catherine cold and unamused. Their union was one rooted in obligation, devoid of warmth. In her retrospection, Catherine described him as emotionally aloof, an evaluation that has lingered through history. Though wedded to one of Europe's most astute leaders, Peter favored the company of young military officers, engaging in fleeting moments of camaraderie over formal duties. These interactions bore the essence of playful enjoyment, often raising eyebrows within the court. His favoritism towards certain officers saw them ascend quickly in rank, resulting in a perplexing pair of dynamics: emotional immaturity for some, or deeper connections hinting at complexities too profound for traditional historical narratives. Peter exhibited an almost obsessive admiration for Frederick the Great of Prussia, mirroring not just his external demeanor but seemingly incorporating aspects of his very essence into his own identity. This fixation raised questions. Was it mere political admiration or something more intimate? Such behavior starkly contrasted with the traditional masculine expectations of the Russian court. His brief reign became emblematic of chaos, with progressive reforms, including the cessation of persecution against the Orthodox Church, met with widespread dissent. His attempts to align Russia with Prussian ideals alienated essential factions like the nobility and military. Meanwhile, Catherine, astute in her understanding of the political landscape, prepared in silence. Barely months into Peter's rule, Catherine launched a coup, aided by military support, that saw her husband dethroned in a dramatic yet bloodless maneuver. Following his imprisonment, Peter died under dubious circumstances. Official reports cited an accident, yet whispers of contrived murder lingered, as Catherine's regime swiftly buried the incident without ceremony. And while the narrative continues to question the nature of Peter's rule, was he too feeble to govern, or simply different in an unforgiving court, the legacy he left was one overshadowed by mockery and derision. Often viewed as a foolish ruler engulfed by the brilliance of his spouse, the true complexities of his character remind us how history tends to treat those it fails to comprehend. As Peter faded into obscurity, the childhood of Prince Paul of Greece unfolded, enveloped in hints of unspoken truths beneath the surface of royal expectations and diplomatic formalities. 17. Prince Paul of Greece. Born in 1901 as the third son of King Constantine I and Queen Sophia, Prince Paul was never destined for kingship. Yet, like many royals entwined in the elaborate tapestry of 20th century monarchy, destiny took an unexpected turn for him. His upbringing unfolded in a Greece embroiled in turmoil, a nation wrestling with its identity amidst a backdrop of kings, coups, and revolutions. Navigating the complex legacy of his lineage, Paul experienced exile, returns, and subsequent banishments, all while receiving a naval education across Europe and immersing himself in various cultures. As he drifted through his formative years, he sought a secure identity in a royal life fraught with contradictions. Polished and poised, Paul played the role of a dutiful prince meticulously, ingrained in the art of survival amidst a landscape that demanded grace and decorum. During this tumultuous period prior to his accession and the ravaging war, whispers about his private life began to swirl. His connections were often with fellow naval officers and aristocrats, particularly during extended stays in London, Paris, and notably Germany. His close friendships with other young men captured the attention of observant diplomats, some noting his disinterest in the typical array of eligible princesses. Paul was described as reserved yet deeply bonded with a tight circle of male companions, of whom Prince Friedrich of Hone was notably prominent. Their shared military training and frequent private travels hinted at an intimacy that eluded the records, prompting curiosity among those in royal circles. Despite the lack of definitive proof, correspondence and accounts from the courts suggested he favored Friedrich's company beyond expected forms. Remaining unmarried into his 30s deviated sharply from royal norms, causing a mix of surprise and relief when he finally became engaged to Princess Frederica of Hanover in 1937. An archetype of beauty and political savviness, Frederica was significantly younger, initiating a solemnly arranged yet diplomatically distant union. Years later, she characterized their marriage in formal terms, often emphasizing Paul's intellect and duty over emotional connection. Nevertheless, they fulfilled their regal responsibilities, birthing heirs including future King Constantine II, and navigating through the upheaval of war and exile. In 1947, after his brother George II's passing, Paul ascended to the throne, presiding over a turbulent decade characterized by Cold War pressures and the fading relevance of monarchies. Even in kingship, Paul wore an enigmatic persona, maintaining a close circle of male advisors from his naval days. His trusted aide, Nicolaus Manu, shared an enduring bond with him, residing in the royal compound for 2 decades and often accompanying Paul on state visits, which raised eyebrows in a world where formality dictated the public narrative. The quietude surrounding these relationships was palpable, lending itself to ongoing speculation that never crossed into outright scandal. Paul's reign concluded with his passing due to cancer in 1964, leaving his son Constantine II to inherit a throne that would soon face political turmoil. Despite the monarchy's abolition in 1973, Paul, unlike many contemporaries, escaped the humiliation of exile through death, being laid to rest in Tator Palace among the remnants of a bygone royal era. His legacy persists in the genteel discourse of history, resting quietly within the folds of personal remembrance. Today, Paul is perceived as a pivotal figure in a waning institution, living effortlessly between the strands of diplomacy and tradition. Yet, beneath the surface of regal obligations lingered a man whose intimate connections often stood in stark contrast to the expectations placed upon his crown. In this realm of royal intrigue, Paul walked a delicate line, echoing a sentiment reminiscent of the tales of Richard the Lionheart, a hero of valor revered and mythologized, yet shadowed by clandestine liaisons that left medieval chroniclers and historians pondering their hidden depths. King Richard, known as the Lionheart, reigns in the minds of history enthusiasts with a name as impactful as a battle cry. His life, marked by valor and ambition, paints the portrait of a quintessential crusader, warrior, and king, a monarch shaped by the ambitions of his mother, Eleanor of Aquitaine, and father, Henry II. Yet, within this iconic image lies a complex man whose relationships confounded the rigid expectations of masculinity in his time. Born in 1157, Richard Plantagenet was a military prodigy, commanding armies by just 16. Ascending the throne of England in 1189, he paradoxically spent limited time on his homeland, preferring the tumult of overseas campaigns and the shifting dynamics of crusader politics. While stories of his battlefield exploits are abundant, very little is chronicled of his private life. This conspicuous absence raises eyebrows regarding the nature of his emotional connections, which often diverged from societal norms. A prime example is his deep bond with Philip II of France. Their alliance in the late 1180s was intimate enough that they shared a bed, a detail chronicled not just by French historians but also by English clerics. In a time when royal men seldom shared sleeping quarters, such action spoke volumes, hinting at a bond that transcended mere friendship, even as their marriages were politically convenient and emotionally empty. Richard's marriage to Berengaria of Navarre was emblematic of political maneuvering, marked by a conspicuous lack of progeny, an anomaly for a monarch expected to father bastards as a point of pride. Notably, Richard never fathered an illegitimate child, a rarity that echoed throughout his reign. The absence of heirs wasn't just a trivial detail in a time when virility was integral to royal pride. It stood out starkly against the norms of kingship. His 1195 confession, made publicly before the Archbishop of Canterbury, added another layer of intrigue to his narrative. Exhibiting such solemnity, his proclamation of sin, the particulars of which remain obscured, drew immediate attention from the clergy, who rushed to absolve him. Historians remain divided on whether this act stemmed from a general acknowledgement of his wartime sins or hinted at deeper, more personal transgressions tied to his emotional attachments. As the Victorian era sought to sanitize his image, transforming Richard into a paragon of knightly virtue, a chaste soldier of Christ, his friendships became mere expressions of brotherhood, while his lack of children was recast as virtue. This sculpted version favored a depiction of an unearthly hero, minimizing the authentic human complexities that defined him. Ultimately, Richard's life concluded in 1199, felled by a crossbow during a distant siege, where even in death, he found it in his heart to pardon his assailant. He was laid to rest at Fontevraud Abbey, alongside his politically astute mother, while his heart found its final resting place in Rouen, Normandy. This fragmentary outcome mirrors a king perpetually caught between the thunderous roar of battle and the whispers of uncharted affection. While Richard's legacy was forged in conflict, another story from history, the tale of the Emperor I of Han, reminds us that not all legacies come from heroics. Some emerge from the gentlest acts of love, carried through time, whispered in reverent tones long after. In the rich tapestries of ancient China's dynastic history, most emperors are remembered for their military campaigns, exceptional reforms, or the crises they navigated. Yet Emperor I of Han stands apart, remembered not for warrior feats, nor for reigning long or leaving a mighty legacy, but for a singular intimate gesture, one executed not with a sword or scepter, but with a simple sleeve. Born as Lin in 27 BC, he ascended the throne when the mighty Han dynasty was already teetering on the brink of collapse. As a young man in his early 20s, he inherited a court rife with chaos, where warlords and ministers vied for control behind the scenes, crafting a drama steeped in intrigue. Into this turbulent play entered Don Gan, a minor court official whose charm and striking good looks captivated the young emperor. Don Gan rapidly climbed through the ranks, garnering titles typically bestowed on seasoned leaders, defying his humble beginnings. In merely a few years, he rose through the bureaucracy more than 30 times, much to the chagrin of jealous officials who murmured their discontent. Yet, Emperor I remained unfazed, drawn inexplicably to Dongxian, a bond that became legendary. The tale of their relationship tells of an afternoon spent together in the imperial quarters. As Don Gan napped on the emperor's lavish silk sleeve, urgent state matters beckoned. Rather than disturb his companion, the emperor made a startling choice. He cut off the sleeve with a dagger, allowing Dong to remain undisturbed in slumber. This act, simple yet profound, would reverberate through Chinese culture, forever encapsulated in the idiom Zhuang Sudash, symbolizing same-gender love, particularly at the hands of rulers with favored companions. Remarkably, in a culture often shrouded in euphemisms regarding queerness, this moment was embraced, recorded within language, and not denounced. However, such a bond was not without its consequences. The relationship stirred unease among court officials, generating whispers of Dongan's undue influence over imperial decisions. With Dong living in the palace and their public appearances frequently, concerns grew that he overshadowed experienced ministers, leading to accusations that state affairs were being neglected due to the emperor's personal attachments. Yet, Emperor Ai's priorities lay firmly in his personal affections, carving out a space for love amidst the constricting expectations of duty. Tragically, this affection met a swift end in 1 BC, with Emperor Ai's sudden death at the tender age of 26. Bereft of an heir or allies, the moment his life faded, the court swiftly turned against Dongan. Stripped of titles, he was cast into exile, and some accounts suggest he faced the grim fate of death, while others imply a descent into obscurity. The man who once shared such closeness with the emperor found himself politically toxic. Yet, the phrase Zhuang Su endured, transcending the couple's tragic end. Unlike other tales of royal romance often tainted by scandal, this narrative evolved into a powerful cultural metaphor, one that lingered through the ages in drama, poetry, and literature, celebrating love and devotion instead of shame. Thus, a mere cut of silk transformed into an eternal symbol, a testament to human connection amidst the chaos of power. And just as Emperor Ai enshrined his affections in cherished idioms, across another realm, King Ferdinand V of Bulgaria cloaked his own clandestine desires in artistry and elegance, ruling not just with authority but with a vibrant spirit concealed in a world that spoke in whispers. King Ferdinand I of Bulgaria emerges from the pages of history as a compelling figure, one who defies the typical narratives that often reduce kings to mere coinage or statues, their complexities lost to time. Unlike many of his royal peers flattened into caricatures, Ferdinand was a vivid character, possessing an extravagant flair that set him apart from the rigid courts of Europe. Born into the distinguished Saxe-Coburg and Gotha dynasty, a lineage that bore the likes of Queen Victoria of Britain and King Leopold of Belgium, Ferdinand entered the world saturated with expectation, yet he arrived with unusual attributes that left traditionalists baffled. His early life unfolded in the opulent salons of the Austro-Hungarian elite, a backdrop that belied his future as a monarch. It was only after a cascade of dynastic dilemmas left Bulgaria's throne vacant that Ferdinand was chosen in 1887, a decision that opened the door to his destiny. Crowned Tsar in 1908, he became the first to occupy that position in a Bulgaria striving to modernize while shackled by Ottoman legacies. From his inception in power, Ferdinand radiated flamboyance, contrasting starkly with his environment, a true connoisseur of aesthetics and the extravagant. Ferdinand's multifaceted interests spanned botany, lepidoptery, and art collection. He was even a meticulous critic of floral arrangements during state functions. His penchant for custom military attire, rich with opulent embroidery, turned heads and ensured that he remained the vibrant focal point of his court. Yet, beneath his ostentatious exterior lay a private life encircled by gossip, a life marked by solitude after the untimely passing of his wife, Princess Marie-Louise, a union that had been more about diplomacy than affection. Post-marriage, Ferdinand's world evolved. He fostered close relations with notably handsome young men, often elevating them to surprising positions within his court, steering whispers about his affection for male companionship. Rumors hinted at his carefree escapades abroad, often under the guise of diplomatic missions, a stark contrast to the constraints of his court in Sofia. But this monarch was no stranger to the art of power. He wielded authority with a cold precision that belied his flamboyant nature. Ferdinand navigated the treacherous waters of war and political intrigue, deftly pitting powerful nations against one another while asserting Bulgaria's status as a kingdom under his governance. Yet, the duality of his public persona and private inclinations created an ever-present tension, ultimately culminating in tragedy during World War I. His ambitions led Bulgaria into chaos, and by 1918, he was forced to abdicate in favor of his son, Boris. In an unexpected twist, Ferdinand accepted his fate with grace, retreating to Coburg, Germany, rather than clinging to a sense of shame or fleeing in disgrace. In his sanctuary, surrounded by nature's bounty, he carved out a serene, self-indulgent existence until his passing in 1948, outliving the empires and monarchies that had once shaped Europe. Ferdinand left behind a unique legacy, a king whose identity danced between flamboyance and artistry, crafting a life that celebrated control rather than conquests. While Ferdinand curated his world with colorful eccentricity, another royal, Archduke Ludwig Victor of Austria, painted an equally striking image, trading steel for silk, as his dramatic narrative unfurled in a manner that was far from conventional. In the opulent world of Habsburg royalty, where formality suffocated individuality, Archduke Ludwig Victor of Austria emerged as a singular figure unafraid to improvise his own narrative. Born in 1842, he was the youngest sibling of Emperor Franz Joseph I and embraced every privilege afforded by royal lineage: immense wealth, prestigious status, luxurious estates, and a front-row view of his family's gradual decline. Yet, rather than immersing himself in military exploits or intricate political strategies, Ludwig Victor carved a reputation for something strikingly unconventional: a flamboyant rejection of societal norms surrounding imperial masculinity, coupled with a life brimming with vibrant scandal and grand spectacles. Affectionately nicknamed Ludi Wuzzy, this moniker started as light-hearted ribbing, eventually morphing into whispered court gossip, encapsulating his essence: airy, effeminate, and delightfully defiant against the conventions binding his brothers. While Franz Joseph reigned with stern control and Maximilian harbored dreams that led him to a grim fate in Mexico, Ludwig Victor was found amidst masked balls, commissioning elaborate self-portraits, and crafting a private world free from oversight. Though technically a general to fulfill Habsburg tradition, he eschewed war and embraced the artistic realm: opera, theatre, painting. His homes brimmed with grand decor and classical sculptures that celebrated youthful male beauty, a passion that was anything but discreet. The court begrudgingly tolerated his eccentricities, for Ludwig Victor held no political clout and posed no real threat to the monarchy's ambitions. This lack of influence meant he enjoyed a fragile freedom that allowed him to dance along the edge of open rebellion. Unmarried and claiming celibacy, ironically, given his disinterest in heirs, his private relationships were a blend of careful secrecy and flamboyant acknowledgement, understood even by the most observant of courtiers. The most scandalous episode unfolded in 1906, not within a grand palace, but at a Viennese bathhouse. Eyewitness accounts surfaced, revealing an altercation that prompted public reports to sanitize the details, yet the suggestion of scandal was unmistakable. The Habsburg court, ever vigilant of its image, soon reached its breaking point. Franz Joseph, aged and conservative, banished his brother to Schloss Klesheim, a palace near Salzburg, sealing his fate in exile. Even so, Ludwig Victor surrounded himself with beauty, both human and architectural. His loyal staff remained by his side, while his days bloomed with art and ritual, only occasionally interrupted by selective companionship. Remarkably, despite the fall from grace, Ludwig Victor never conformed or issued apologies to satisfy imperial expectations. He refrained from public statements or attempts at a comeback. He chose instead a quiet, unrepentant life. Ludwig Victor passed away in 1919 at the age of 76, just after the Austro-Hungarian Empire crumbled. The rigid hierarchies and enforced traditions of his youth had dissipated, yielding to a reshaped modern Europe emerging from war's ashes. Although he didn't witness these changes, his life had inadvertently begun to dismantle the concept of royal uniformity. In his whimsical, often scandalous existence, he became a pioneer, a man who embraced fragrance in a world dominated by gunpowder, sought joy amid the complexities of power, and steadfastly refused to pursue the throne everyone expected him to chase. In stark contrast, King Charles I of Württemberg, with a gentler defiance, navigated his rule through diplomacy. Rather than seeking companionship among generals or aristocratic women, he found solace in a charming American chamberlain, whose name circulated through Europe cloaked in the intrigue of untold tales, forever out of reach of official acknowledgement. King Charles I of Württemberg adorned his crown with a graceful subtlety, evoking a time of elegance rather than the clamour of policy-making. Ruling from 1864 to 1891, his nearly five-decade reign was marked by a restrained constitutional monarchy often characterized as stable and uneventful. Yet, beyond the polished outlines of his biography, lie whispers of an intriguing personal saga that threaten to unravel the delicate diplomacy of his rule. Born in 1823 into an era where royal figures were expected to exemplify marital propriety, Charles found himself in a landscape of shifting royal alliances and arrangements that resembled contracts more than love stories. In 1846, he wed Grand Duchess Olga Nikolaevna of Russia, a union rooted in political necessity rather than romance, devoid of children or passionate affirmations. While Olga devoted herself to charitable endeavors and cultural pursuits, Charles sought companionship beyond their bond. Enter Charles Woodcock, a charismatic young American whose presence in the royal sphere perplexed Wurttemberg's conservative society. Initially a royal chamberlain, Woodcock soon evolved beyond a mere court functionary to a steadfast companion to the king. His elevation to the rank of baron stirred controversy among the aristocracy, prompting whispers and outrage as court officials questioned the appropriateness of their companionship, which some speculated hinted at a deeper connection. As scandal brewed, Woodcock found it increasingly untenable to remain in the palace, resigning in 1888, leaving a gaping wound in the otherwise calm fabric of Charles's reign. Though Charles never openly addressed the matter, the effect of Woodcock's departure was palpable. The king's health deteriorated, and he withdrew into seclusion, supported only by Olga, who never publicly cast judgment. Whether she was aware of the full extent of the relationship or accepted the growing chasm between them remains a question of historical speculation. Upon Charles's passing in 1891, his funeral upheld the restrained decorum that characterized his life, erasing any mention of Woodcock. The complexities of their bond linger on, hidden within letters and whispers. The truth of their connection rests in anonymity, inviting curiosity about a royal figure whose life straddled duty and desire. Charles I's tale serves as a reminder of an era's constraining expectations, a monarch who dwelled in the shadows of love while navigating the rigid norms of his time. Meanwhile, Prince Hubertus of Prussia was destined to confront a harsher reality, a world marred by war and tyranny, clashing with the very essence of his identity. In the shadows of history stands Prince Hubertus of Prussia, born into a lineage steeped in militarism and silent authority, as the grandson of the last German emperor, Kaiser Wilhelm II. His family, the House of Hohenzollern, had long ruled with an iron fist and a grand display, crafting a legacy built on obedience and honor. Yet, as fate would have it, Hubertus, a prince by birth, found himself ensnared in the collapse of an empire. Born in 1909, he navigated a world on the brink of upheaval, as revolutions brewed and empires crumbled around him. By age 10, he witnessed the Kaiser's exile and the rise of the Weimar Republic, a time when his family's royal stature was reduced to mere symbol and scrutiny. Unlike his brothers, who donned the imperial military's uniform with pride, Hubertus was a man apart, drawn to literature and the calm of nature rather than the clangor of drills and parades. His temperament, marked by sensitivity and refinement, sat uneasily against the backdrop of the austere Hohenzollern image. As the darkness deepened in the 1930s, a time when Nazi ideology demanded compliance and loyalty, many aristocrats either supported the regime or chose silence to guard their futures. The extended Hohenzollern clan was no exception, as some publicly embraced nationalist sentiments. However, Hubertus maintained a cautious distance from the political fervor. While he enlisted in the military, whispers circulated about his private life and friendships with male companions, leading to speculation about his disinterest in traditional marriage and public life. These were the stormy undercurrents of a society where deviation was dangerous. Though he wore the Luftwaffe's uniform, some doubted his conviction, and amidst growing internal conflict, he grappled with serving a regime that contradicted his very essence. His life drew to a tragic conclusion in 1950 during a humanitarian endeavor in Africa when appendicitis claimed him at the tender age of 41. His family mourned, yet historians largely overlook the intricacies of his existence, perhaps content to let the quiet prince fade into obscurity rather than confront the complexity he embodied. Prince Hubertus's legacy speaks of a subtle defiance, one not marked by rebellion, but profound integrity. He chose silence over conformity, sidestepping the paths laid out by a family that embraced fascism. Meanwhile, King Henry II of France navigated a very different realm, draping his contradictions in lavish court life, balancing the affections of a powerful queen and a famous mistress, all while stirring endless speculation among his male courtiers. King Henry II of France, often captured in history as the man sandwiched between two formidable women, his wife Catherine de' Medici and his renowned mistress Diane de Poitiers, created a royal triangle more famous than most. Their portraits reside side by side, hanging in castles where the whispers of history echo through the air. Yet, overshadowed by these glamorous figures, lies a hidden aspect of Henry's emotional landscape, one not shaped by women but by a circle of young men whose presence hinted at unspoken truths, leaving a lingering scent of mystery behind. Born in 1519 as the second son of the vibrant Francis I, Henry's childhood left indelible marks on his character. He became a pawn in the fierce rivalry between France and the Habsburg Empire, spending years at the Spanish court, returning to France as a more restrained man, more enigmatic than his flamboyant father. Henry thrived in the shadows, preferring the solace of routine and rich silences over the allure of the spotlight. At just 14, he wed Catherine, whose political acumen was matched only by her frosty demeanor and unwavering patience. While their union produced 10 children, the affection between them was conspicuously absent. Henry's heart was often elsewhere, notably drawn to the enchanting Diane, who, more than 20 years his senior, shared not only his bed but the cultural landscape of the time. Yet, just beneath this apparent affair lay a more intricate tapestry. Henry nurtured a circle of youthful male companions, noblemen whose swift rise through court ranks often puzzled onlookers. One figure among these companions was de Montmorency, a name that may perplex today but was well respected in 16th century France. Montmorency was not a mere servant. He was Henry's closest ally, confidant, and possibly his most cherished friend, with a remarkable trajectory that elevated him to positions of power that mirrored the king's own. Their bond extended beyond the ceremonial. They shared meals, excursions, and intimate moments, forging a companionship that drew the curiosity of contemporaries. Young male attendants frequently enjoyed considerable access to Henry's private life, a phenomenon often dismissed as mere military or educational obligations. Yet, whispers of suspicion filled the air, provoking discomfort among courtiers and clergy alike concerning the dynamics forming around their king. Catherine remained silent, embracing the role of strategist, fully aware of the power of discretion. Diane, perceptive in her own right, appeared willing to accept Henry's emotional connections, provided her status remained unchallenged. Henry's reign was marred by warfare and religious strife, a portrait of chaos contrasting sharply with his softer personal inclinations. He preferred loyalty to the harsh realities of rulership, cultivating bonds with younger men that stood in stark relief against the era's ruthless political climate. His life met a dramatic end in 1559 when a lance pierced his eye during a tournament, a tragic and poetic demise that left behind a legacy intertwined with formidable women and fleeting companions. With his passing, a world shifted, and Montmorency's fortunes rapidly declined under the ensuing political realignments. While history predominantly remembers Henry for the women who surrounded him, there exists an alternate narrative woven through covert exchanges, subtle gestures, and a cast of young men whose names linger in the margins of history. As Henry's story fades into the annals of time, marked by pageantry and conflict, another, quieter legacy breathes life through the hidden corridors of influence, unwrapped in the shadows of Parisian clubs and soft-spoken dialogues held away from prying eyes. Prince Louis II of Monaco emerges in the twilight of a bygone era, embodying the struggle to govern a kingdom as small as a golf course while expected to radiate an aura of grandeur. Born in 1870, he inherited a principality admired in postcards but lacking true power. Despite his limited geopolitical influence, Louis captivated hearts with an enigmatic persona, shrouded in the shadows of war and a discreet private life that Monaco chose to overlook, even as it thrived on observing. Before ascending to the throne, Louis walked the path of a soldier, serving with distinction in the French army during World War I. His valor and intellect earned him respect on the battlefield, yet it was his escapades away from the front lines that truly captivated his contemporaries. Louis spent his early years in Paris, immersing himself in a social realm that was neither underground nor sanctioned by aristocratic norms. The Paris of the Belle Epoque was a luxurious stage, where secrecy flourished, and therein, Louis found his niche, forging bonds with artists, designers, and French diplomats, creating a dazzling presence that lit up even the duller salons. Rumors, like an enticing perfume, swirled around him, speaking of his connections to an eclectic circle of young men, dancers and poets, with ambiguous titles yet a constant presence. What he cultivated, however, was a ballet of discretion. There were no scandalous headlines, for Monaco detested public dramas, and Louis was a master tactician who understood the art of subtlety. Though he never embraced marriage in the traditional sense, he did welcome a daughter, Charlotte, with a French cabaret singer, a fleeting romance gracefully managed with whispered arrangements only royalty could orchestrate. Charlotte's legitimization and subsequent acknowledgement as heir sealed the preservation of the dynasty, yet the prince himself remained a captivating riddle. Under Louis's reign, Monaco transformed from a quaint resort into a hub of geopolitical intrigue and affluence, a playground for the rich, and eventually a cultural beacon. He established an oceanographic institute, amassed Napoleonic relics, and fostered a connection with scholars and historians, cultivating an intellectual existence while keeping his emotional life veiled. Diplomats spoke of his eccentricity and isolation, enlightening tales of solitary dinners, coastal strolls, and the silent arrivals of male companions who appeared for fleeting moments but left no imprints in the realm of formal introductions. Scandals and confessions were absent from his story, only a recurrent narrative marked by silence. In 1949, Louis abdicated, entrusting the throne to his grandson, Rainier III, retreating into the quietude of a private life until his passing the same year. He bequeathed Monaco a world of glamour yet to be discovered, one intertwined with Hollywood royalty. Long before the dazzling lights, the casinos, and the paparazzi, Louis lingered as the hushed prince of secrets, ruling not with spectacle but with an intricate tapestry of discretion. And if Louis II's tale closed in silence, James' eyes began with vibrant spectacle, marking a lineage of royal figures who reigned in stealth, loved deeply under the guise of secrecy, and lived under the ever-watchful gaze of history, a lineage rich in intricacy, one the history books could never fully comprehend.